Welcome to Bridging the Education Gap, the podcast where parents, teachers, and education leaders come together to share insights, stories, and strategies that connect learning at home and in school. Whether you're a parent navigating homework struggles, a teacher fostering classroom breakthroughs, or an education leader seeking innovative solutions, this is your space to learn, grow, and collaborate. Each week, we dive into real conversations about education, from tackling pain points to celebrating success stories, all with one goal: to bridge the gap and empower every child's learning journey. I'm your host, Jessica Shelley. Let's get started. Today, we have a fantastic guest, Mitchell Hemphill. Mitchell has been in education for 27 years, working across 3 provinces in Canada and serving in various leadership roles as a teacher, vice principal, and now principal. He has a unique talent for revitalizing school culture, empowering educators, and fostering trust in his teams. From teaching high school math to unexpectedly stepping into elementary school administration, Mitchell's journey is filled with pivotal moments, bold decisions, and a deep commitment to student success. Today, we'll dive into his story, his insights on leadership, school culture, and what it takes to transform a learning environment. Welcome to the podcast, Mitchell.
Thank you very much for having me. That person sounds wonderful.
Well, you are. We're so excited to have you and dive deeper into your story and your background. To get us started today, let's talk a little bit about your journey. So you started as a math teacher, later moved into administration. What was that kind of transition like for you?
It's a very interesting story. I said I was teaching high school math. I think it was around 10, 11 years. And I found myself in this rut of teaching grade 10 math 4 periods a day, every day. And I just remember after 2 or 3 years of that, I'm thinking, let's say 40 years old, I'm in a bell schedule. I'm just doing the same thing and repetitively over and over again. And I decided that it was time to make a change. And so that was really the first, I guess, along the journey, the first real big change that I made. And since then, I've been in 8 different schools and joined the administration team. So it has been quite a wild journey since that big pivotal change moment, I guess.
Yeah, and you've kind of explained your story about how you worked in different provinces throughout Canada too. So I want to kind of tap into that. What inspired these big moves or these big transitions that you experienced in your career?
Well, again, going to that first pivotal change, I said after teaching grade 10 math 4 periods a day, a resource position opened up in my high school, which is working with students with diverse needs and working with teachers. So that was something that excited me. It's something I never planned on doing at all. But again, the opportunity presented itself, and I put myself out there. And that's one thing I've found over the years. When you went to an interview of any type, you're very vulnerable because you have to present yourself, and it's very uncomfortable. Like this whole doing podcasts is very uncomfortable too. Once it's done and over with, it's fine, but it's just you feel vulnerable. But I remember thinking, okay, if I want to change, what do I need to do to make the change? So I applied for this resource position and got it. After doing that for a year and a half, as I said before, the administration journey was never really something that I thought about a whole lot. It's that, again, since the age of 3, I've known I wanted to be a teacher. So I just thought I'd be a teacher. You put your 32, 33, 34 years, and then you retire, and that's what you do. So 10 years teaching math, a year and a half in resource, then an opportunity came for an administration job in an elementary school next to the high school that I was working at. So I've never had any elementary experience. I've never supply taught in an elementary school. The only experience was dropping my kids off at the door and saying, have a wonderful day type thing. So a job was posted for a vice principal. And as I said, I think they ran the ad a couple of times, and sitting in my cubicle doing paperwork, Excel spreadsheets, tracking data and all that stuff, I thought, well, maybe life is more exciting than this. I said, oh, the heck with it. I'm going to email and express my interest in the vice principal position. Yeah. So by that afternoon, I met with the superintendent and the director of education, and I was the new vice principal of an elementary school. And that was I think that was January 12th. And by January 16th, I was a vice principal of elementary school, also teaching grade 1 phys ed, grade 2 art, grade 4 math, grade 4 social studies. Again, never stepped a foot in an elementary school, and I've never done administration either. So I've always joked if I survived that first term of doing that, I could basically do anything that was put in front of me. So I always joke about that. And I always reference to, I'm like Mike Ross off of Suits. He was always the lawyer, but he didn't have any qualifications or anything like that. So I always felt I was a fraud because I was doing this job as an administration and I didn't have my modules or I didn't have my principal certificate. So thought, well, let's try it, see if you like it, and then started working towards those credentials. So I can now say that I have my certificate and I can do the job legally, we'll say.
Oh my goodness. I love that too. So tell us more about your transition from, you have had a couple different principalships. You had mentioned when we originally connected about a trip to BC and how that was like a big transition. So maybe tell us a little bit more about either teaching in the different provinces or what shaped your perspective towards moving towards BC now.
Yeah, so I did 20. So I was born and raised in New Brunswick, the eastern side of Canada. I did 25 years in New Brunswick education. And again, sort of once I became a change junkie too, once I left the classroom, resource and administration. So after doing various schools in New Brunswick, my son was going away for hockey in the States. So I thought he's going to be away for a year. What can I do? Might as well do something as well. So I applied for a job in Northern Alberta in Fairview. And I think August of 2023, I moved to Fairview, Alberta. I got settled there and went to the school. It was a K-6 school, 230 students. When I got settled there, I had to do some staffing and get everything situated. And I flew into British Columbia to visit my brother. And when I flew into British Columbia in the lower mainland into Abbotsford, again, over the mountains, the lush greenery of BC versus Fairview, Alberta, which is flat and no trees, no mountains, I said, I'm moving to British Columbia. And I'm a big proponent of throwing it out into the universe and see what happens. And I remember driving through the trees and whatnot. My brother lives in the Rolly Lake area. And I was driving over to Vancouver. And I remember just throwing it out there and said, if it's meant to be, let's make it happen. And by October, I had accepted a job in the Kootenay Mountains of British Columbia. So again, if you haven't looked it up or if you don't know where I'm talking about, just Google Kootenay Mountains and you'll see why I moved to the Kootenay Mountains. It's absolutely breathtaking. It's beautiful. But again, the opportunity presented itself. I felt bad for leaving Alberta and after only 4 months. So I started this job in January of 2024. But it definitely, I look at that experience as they needed me and I needed them. So I've taken a lot from that experience in that short 4 months and just learning how Alberta does their thing and how British Columbia does their thing. So I've been in 3 provinces and it's been remarkable on the difference between the 3. And I'll say it this way, the more you know, the more eye-opening it is and sometimes the more frustrating because of the politics involved in education. But again, that's a whole different podcast.
We can definitely talk about
That's a
that.
whole different show when you're looking at politics and education for sure.
Yeah, yeah.
I'm currently in a K to 12 school, 100 students, a brick and mortar, and I also am the principal of Arrow Lakes Distributed Learning, which is the online for our district. Again, we're a very small district, but we have about 35, 50 kids, depending on the time of the year, that do the online. So I'm also the principal there as well. And that was one of the main reasons why I liked this position was because of the distributed leadership style of the district, because it is so small. And again, it gave me more to do and to look forward to, and just to broaden my portfolio of various things that I'm capable of doing, I guess, as a school administrator.
I love that your kind of experience really lends itself to different perspectives, right? So you started as a math teacher, then a resource teacher, then an assistant principal, then a principal, all very different perspectives and roles within a school building. And then you have that experience too that goes really across to Canada in 3 different
Uh-huh.
provinces that gives you different perspective about, how to lead and cultivate a culture of trust. And so I want to tap into that a little bit too, because you have such varied perspectives and experiences that you've had in your journey. So what does revamping school culture mean to you? And like, what does that look like in the building? What is the experience that you have with your teachers and students?
So, I've said this out loud before, and I want to make that clear here. There's a difference between, as you said, vast experience. Again, this is, I believe, school 8 and 9 with the online. There's a huge difference between being confident and cocky in, what you're capable of doing. And so I always rely that I'm very confident because of the vast experience, nor do I pretend I know everything. I do jokingly say nothing shocks me anymore. But with that said, on Monday, again, we're in the mountains, so I had to arrange for the village to come and take a dead deer carcass off the school property. So that was the first time for that. We believe some coyotes chased a deer down, but so again, I say nothing shocks me, but that was a first for me as well. But again, I feel that when I go into a new building, and I've talked this out with other people before, when jobs are posted, for example, I can physically see myself in those buildings, and I will talk to various people. Okay, what does this building need? And if I'm able to provide what the building needs, then I usually apply for it. But I've also calmed myself down because I figure that I can, anytime that job's posted, I feel like I need to apply and go in and help the school out. So I've gotten better with that. But I find the climate and culture in buildings is crucial. And I feel that that's been my purpose in this journey, is to build a positive climate and culture in all of the buildings. Because once the students and staff you mentioned trust and they're feeling seen, then that is when the real work begins. Because as you know, when you have a connection with your teacher or your connection with your administrator, you're at ease, and then you can do your work because you're not stressed about, how you're feeling or all of the things that come with that. So that's one thing I think is my secret, is building those relationships with people, having trust that they're the professionals and they were hired to do a job. And I've used this expression before, get out of their way so they can do their job. It's not me being lazy, just going to sit back and just watch what you're doing. But again, I trust that that's what they're doing, is because they were hired to be a teacher. So I'm assuming they're going to go in and do their magic with whatever role they were hired to do. But again, it comes down to relationships, and as long as the kids and the staff feel seen, I think that's the secret.
What are some of those strategies that you might use day in, day out to kind of build and foster those relationships with staff and students?
And which I shared this story briefly with you before, that simple of just saying good morning to staff. And that wasn't brought to my attention really until I was in Alberta. I had an educational assistant I think it was day 2 or day 3. And she came, I get chills thinking about it. She came up to me and said, "I can't believe you had said good morning to me 2 or 3 mornings in a row." I know the look on my face was like, what? But we had a conversation about it. And she said that's not normal behavior from an administrator that she has worked with, that, it's not something that people do. So I thought at that moment, I said, that's so interesting. And I figured at that point I had a lot of work to do, but a very easy fix by saying good morning to everyone is pretty simple. But I would purposely go around in that building. There was 3 wings. I would make sure I would go to everyone's door and have a 10-second conversation, also knowing that they're there to prep in the morning. So I wasn't going into big depth conversations unless they wanted to. It was just, again, feeling seen, that they know that them showing up to work that morning was important, and appreciated that they did show up.
What advice would you give to, like, maybe a new principal that's just, you had mentioned you apply for jobs as you see that you could see yourself in, but what advice would you give to like a principal stepping into a struggling school, or maybe a brand new principal that this is maybe their first principalship or assistant principalship? Like, how can they get off on the right foot with staff and students from day one?
So I had a conversation with a colleague from New Brunswick. This just happened on the weekend. He is new to administration. He's very similar personality to mine. He's been a high school teacher. He's currently a math lead. And so he wants to do something different. And so that was the exact advice or question for him. And the advice I gave to him was do just that. Again, tis the season for all the administration jobs to be posted. And I said to him, I have physically gone to every school that I applied for, and I've walked the building. I've let the custodians, I go when everyone's left the building, the custodians are always working. So I've asked them to let me in, and I'll walk through the building and I literally looking for some sort of sign, does this building speak to me, and am I needed here? And I've done that with, well, not everyone, because I didn't get all the way to Alberta to do my walkabout. It was only 5,000 kilometers away, so it's made it difficult. But I find that that's very important. And just, again, asking the important questions. And if you feel that you can make a difference, then by all means, go for it. but check yourself in the fact that if you think you're going into administration because of the title, no, you are doing it for all of the wrong reasons. Just the other day, someone referenced me as boss. And I cringed, like the thought of, and I know my body language was like, no, don't, no. We're teammates, we're team members, we're all on the same page here. And I've shared this with other people too. My mom was a school bus driver. I respect school bus drivers. My brother was a school bus driver and does custodial. I respect those jobs and those positions. It doesn't matter if you're the superintendent or if you are the librarian or resource teacher. I don't want to do their job, so I appreciate all of those people that come into my building. They're there to do their job. And so there's no tiers or levels between, we're all equal, we're all important in this whole business, and it's a tough job. Administration teaching is all tough, so we need to do it together and have all the resources that we can, that we are, just working together is so important. So yeah,
Something
if you're going into administration, you need to know your core beliefs and values, and you need to be there for the right reason.
Yeah, I think that what you mentioned too about, recognizing every role and the importance that it plays in your school community really kind of corresponds to like an educator in perspective of the students that you have in your building, and really kind of cultivating that not only within your classroom, but in your school building as a whole. We value every single person. Each one of us has a unique job and role within our classroom, but also in our school large. And so that would be some great advice, I think, too, for educators, is to kind of think about maybe on a smaller scale with your smaller bodies that are in your classroom. Well, maybe bigger bodies if you teach in school, but
Absolutely.
how can that impact really go and influence the full culture of the school as well that you're cultivating from an admin level as well? I want to kind of shift gears because you've been in education for 27 years. The future is, I'm not sure where education is going, at least in the United States. We have a lot kind of up in the air right now. So I would love to maybe get some perspective on where you're hopeful that education will go, both in Canada or like just general trends, and what's most exciting about what's coming.
Wow, that's a big question.
Yes, I'm so sorry to spring it on you.
So again, I'll talk to my experience just in New Brunswick, Alberta, and British Columbia. And I feel that I can talk about Alberta a little bit. Again, it was only 4 months, but I found them to be very much data driven. For example, in the first 3 days, they needed us to test every student in the school. It was a lot. And I shared my concerns with the superintendent and my colleagues at the time. And many of us had the same core beliefs, this is not right. Especially as a school administrator, I was also teaching math, for example, and trying to get a school up and running and everything. But at the same time, I had to be teaching grade 6 math and make sure all my students were assessed, and so the data could be passed on to the district. I get why we collect data. Everyone needs to have a baseline. I get that part. But there's that time and place when you do testing. One thing I have always struggled with is when we are teaching, we're expected to do universal design of learning, scaffolding and all your different lessons and get everyone where they're at, move them forward. But then we go and say, okay, well, now we're going to do a standardized test. Makes no sense. It never has made any sense. So after 27 years, I still haven't made sense of it all. But then I put the administrator hat on and said, well, we need to have baseline data. So there's that part. And the shift from that to the holistic approach of the whole student and all of that, the swing has been there. But again, I think the core is find where your student is at and you move them forward. They're not all the same. Every kid is not the same. Every teacher's not the same. So it's being more relaxed, being more in tune of what kids need. And you need a toolbox of all the resources. Like again, in New Brunswick, we did the science of reading. And Alberta was doing something completely different, but again, leaning towards the science of reading. And then you watch the podcast on, how terrible running records are, and these corporations are in there just to make money, and like you can go crazy with trying to understand it all. So my philosophy is have a toolbox of all of the things that are available. And that's when you take little Johnny, he needs a little bit of this from column A, a little bit of column B, a whole lot of from column C. And as the professionals in the classroom, that's our job, is to figure out what little Johnny needs. And we have all these resources to pull from. So to have a cookie cutter, one way of doing things hasn't worked. That's probably how I was taught back in, well, I just turned 50, so we'll go back. I started school in 1980. So I've been in education for a long time, since 1980. So I have seen it all. But again, we have conversations around, do you do time math test anymore? Do you do spelling list? And, you're trying to find what the patterns of spelling lists that kids can to their advantage and all this like word your way, blah blah blah, all of the things. So again, when I hear politicians talk about, this is what I'm going to do, and I literally cringe because I've been through it all. There's no one right way of doing things. You need to have that perspective. Okay, this is what this child needs, and as I said, working together, and all the resources are hopefully are made available to the staff. Yeah. If I was tasked with running the Department of Education for the United States, for example, that would be an overwhelming task. But again, it would be a huge one to take on. But you need to know that mindset of there's not one thing there's no cookie cutter thing for education, that's for sure.
Yeah, these kind of like rigid systems of the past are not going to move us to
No.
the future.
No, I don't think that's where we need to go. I think we need to bury that and to move on. So it is exciting when I see new politicians do come in, and when the Minister of Education actually has education background, it's nice. But again, they also have to be in tune of what's going on. Just because an administrator or a Minister of Education has 35 years of experience, if that administrator sat in his office and did nothing, then that experience means nothing. So you have to have someone who's willing to do the work and put the work in, and be flexible, and learn all of the things. So as I
Yeah.
said, it's not an easy job, but again, that's why I love it, because it's exciting. It is changing on the fly a lot. People say, everything, you see the cycles and all that things, but again, it just, to me, it's building my toolbox, and then I have different perspectives and different tools and resources to pull from. So I think that's what makes me a better administrator, a better teacher.
Can you also maybe speak to, and because you're currently the principal of the online school in your district as well, and so maybe you could speak to how technology might influence where we go or how quickly we get there, and kind of revitalizing education away from those more static or rigid systems of the past.
So again, the Arrow Lakes distributed learning students, again, they're in the program for a reason. The brick and mortar schools are not for them. So, but we do also have some kids who go, for 2 periods a day at a school, and then their afternoons are online, because that's what's best for them. And again, there's some administrators in our system that say, brick and mortar, you have to do this, and there's no flexibility whatsoever. So it's never black and white. And that's what I love about this. The online part is that these kids are getting the one-on-one with their teacher. On Wednesdays, for example, the students come in and do art with teachers. We had some that come in and did cooking yesterday. They go skiing, they rock climbing, all of the things. So they interacting social with each other, because we provide those opportunities. Technology is wonderful when it works, but you have to make that available to everybody. So yeah, it's I've had this conversation a million times around, should every student have an iPad or a Chromebook? We have no technology whatsoever, and we go to the paper pen. Someone sent me a study here probably 2 months ago, and I can't remember the country right off, but they decided that basically it's all pen and paper. So they've got rid of all of that technology stuff. It's just a distraction. In Canada, basically every province has just banned cell phones during the school day. Again, it's definitely advantages to that, disadvantages. Again, it's always up to the teacher's discretion of what's best for their students, because they know what that student needs. Again, if your child is ADHD and needs to have music playing while they're working on their math facts or their math sheet, or they're doing research for downstairs right now, there's kids doing science fair projects. So again, headphones on, listening to music while they're researching. I support that all day, every day. So it comes down to knowing your individual students and what they need. So again, there's no yes to technology, no to technology. Then there's the whole discussion around, the chat, whatever, the different letters, all that. Like, there's just so much. Again, it can just be overwhelming, and you can just say, ban it all, so no one has to deal with any of it. But again, you can only bury your head in the sand for so long.
Yeah, I think too, like some of the undertones of the conversation we've had today is really about that flexibility of thought and like the personalization of the interactions you have with the teachers, but the interactions in the rules or restrictions that you may or may not have for students. And so there is no one clear path, which I think is very clear, no matter where you are or where you've been, where you're going. Education is one of those things that I think we have to continuously think about what are the next steps that is best for kids. So that way we can be proactive in supporting them and answer some of those questions, but also realize that even if something is implemented, it may not be best. And we are using that data to also inform what the next steps are then again.
Yeah, and that's the same with teachers. That just triggered a memory. Like with teachers, if they want to try something, they want to do something in their classrooms. And again, I said earlier, I get out of their way and let them do it. And then if it worked, we celebrate the heck out of it and share it with everyone that we know. But if there's failures, then again, we learn from it, pull up our socks and try again. Back home, again, we were looking at a proposal for math running records. There's a lady, Dr. Nikki, out of the States who does, we did running records in literacy for years. And so we stumbled across this running records in mathematics. And so my school brought it in. And then now I think probably in that district, 13, 14 schools are now doing it because we had huge success with it. We saw what the kids were able to do with it. So we shared it, celebrated it, and then it spread through the district. So those are the things that, you try and you success or it fails, big deal.
Yeah. And don't be afraid of innovation. Don't be afraid in taking the next step, trying something new, because that's the only way that things are going to keep moving forward, really.
Exactly. And giving students voice and choice along the journey. It's all that. It boils down to trust in the teachers, building relationships with the kids and those connections. And again, when you have that connection, the kids are going to come to class. They're going to be happy. The teachers are happy. Once the teachers are happy, the students are happy. The administrators are happy. Parents are happy. And anyway, all of the things are there. So I think it boils down to building trust and feeling seen for sure.
Well, Mitchell, thank you so much for sharing your journey and insights with us today. Your perspectives on leadership, cultivating school culture, and creating a welcoming environment for educators and students is truly inspiring. To our listeners, thank you for tuning in to another episode of Bridging the Education Gap. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to subscribe and share it with others in your community. Join us next time as we continue to explore how educators and parents can work together to empower every child's learning journey.